Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Spiritual health and development sometimes doesn't really have a framework to follow. So what we've done is we put together the A's of spiritual health and well-being. Amal, Akhlaq, Aqidah. In today's segment, we're going to talk about Amal, and in particular, the ones that you can do here and now and have a direct impact on from the now to the hereafter. Starting with the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that faith has over 70 branches. A'laha, the highest, la ilaha illallah, Aqidah. Adnaha, the lowest, removing something harmful from the road. This is an action of the hands, a simple action, and that's what we want to kind of focus on today. And al-haya min al-Iman. Haya it's almost like a personality trait. Modesty. So we'll get into that one a little later, but this idea of faith having over 70 branches, it's not specified specifically. So if you think about a treatment plan, if you wanted to develop your Iman, you could choose any one of these branches and focus on it. I recommend starting with the lowest. It comes in a hadith where a man came across a thorny bush or something on the road and he cut it, he removed it. That's all he did. Imagine you're walking down the street, something harmful on the road, and you remove it. Nobody's there to see you, you just do it. There's no reciprocity, there's no specific return on that activity. You do it out of sincerity. فَشَكَرَ اللَّهُ لَهُ فَغَفَرَ لَهُ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgave that man, and that man goes to Jannah just for that. And you know, what's probably coming to your mind is so many other little stories of people doing small deeds and getting Jannah as a result. And truly, the Prophet Muhammad said that one of the most beloved deeds to Allah are the ones that are done consistently, even if small. Al-maa'un, the ma'uniyat. There's a chapter in the Quran called Ma'un, وَيَمْنَعُونَ al-maa'un. Some of the worst people are the ones that withhold the easiest of things. This concept of ma'un is, things that are a minimum level of kindness. And there's different interpretations. Like, one of the concrete examples given is like lending somebody a pot or a pan. Or imagine lending somebody a pen. Or just give something that costs you nothing. But if you extend that could include things like information. Informational support is one of the easiest things to give. Somebody asks you a question, you answer that question. But this idea of ma'uniyat can be a framework in and of itself. When you assess yourself, when people ask me for small little things, do I give it? A smile, a thank you. Doesn't cost you anything, yet it has impact. What happens when you don't have and people ask you for it? There's a hadith where the Prophet Muhammad says, لا تسعون الناس بأموالكم ولكن يسعهم منكم بسط الوجه وحسن الخلق. That you cannot enrich all the people with your wealth, but rather you can enrich them with a cheerful face and good character. Something very simple. So somebody comes and asks you for something and you can't really give, at the very least, a kind word, a cheerful face, not making them feel guilty for asking you, right? However, one day, there was a knock on Aisha radiallahu anha's door. So the home of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And those of you that have been to Medina, you know now where his home is, right? It's the central place, probably most visited area, maybe after the Kaaba in the world. I mean, just to be even in that area is a blessing. Baqi' right beside it. Anyway, a lady knocks on the door. جاءتني مسكينة تحمل ابنتين لها فأطعمتها 3 تمرات. This lady comes with her 2 daughters and she's begging. She wants something. Now, remember, the Prophet Muhammad's home rarely had food in it. In fact, Aisha radiallahu anha narrates to her nephew, she says, we used to see 3 crescents in 2 months where no fire lit in our houses. Meaning 3 months, they never cooked anything. So her nephew says, ما كان يعيشكم. How did you survive? How did you sustain yourself? She قالت الأسودان التمر والماء. She said water and dates. Okay, so imagine 3 months they're living off of water and dates. And at this point, this lady comes, knocks on the door, and Aisha brings her 3 dates. And this mother, now, I heard this story today. Sheikh Bilal gave it, and it took me into my typical psycho-spiritual state where I'm thinking, I'm just thinking about this mother, and she's carrying these 2 girls, and that's her only source of sustaining them. And she comes. So I imagine what would have happened is that she put the girls down, gave each one of them. Okay, now, this is a famous story. But in the hadith, when you read it, it doesn't fill in the storyline. So if you want to add that expansion pack and think a little deeper, she had given the dates. She had split the dates with them, gave them, and then the hadith continues saying that she went and raised the date to her mouth, and it's like her daughters were looking at her, and so she split the date in 2 and gave it to both. Aisha radiallahu anha says that she was so amazed by this, she told the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said, indeed, Allah has made paradise obligatory for her because of it. She will go to Jannah. That lady will definitely go to Jannah. You don't have to be rich to get into Jannah. You don't have to have anything to go into Jannah. This small deed. Now, of course, there's a lot more that goes with this lady in particular. But when you think about it, okay, so if you kind of extend the timeline a little bit, she puts her kids down. This is my addition to this story, my commentary. She must have thanked Aisha radiallahu anha, Jazakallahu khairan, thank you, you know what I mean? By this time, the kids probably just already ate the dates up right away. They're probably starving. So, and then before she was about to eat it, they were done. So the question is, when you think about mothers and how much they sacrifice themselves for their kids, we forget this, our own mothers and what they've done for us. I mean, you almost killed your mom coming into this world. وَقُلْ رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا, and say, oh Allah, have mercy on them as they had mercy on me when I was a child. And we have these stories of, how mothers kind of sacrifice themselves for children. The reason I say this is because I remember reading this article. I was doing some, deeper digging into some of the, philosophy underneath Akhlaq and that kind of stuff. And I came across this article for Jane English. I think it's in the 70s though, a long time ago. And it talks about the duties, like when it comes to children, says that children don't owe their parents anything as a repayment for sacrifices made in raising them. Okay? She'll argue that parents chose to have children. It's their responsibility. It's not a loan, and they're not in a position of debt that has to be repaid. Now, if you stop there and don't read the rest of the article, you'll be like, the hell? This is so anti-Islamic. This is against collectivism. This is against any culture that respects parents and all that. But that's not really her main argument, right? Yes, there's some transactional stuff in there, but for her, she's arguing that the moral reasons should come from love, friendship, that ongoing relationship, that care. So when you dig a little deeper, it makes sense. But from an Islamic perspective, you can never repay your mother. There was actually a story of a man who was carrying his mom on his back and doing tawaf. You guys been to Umrah? So you know how hard that could be. And he's carrying on her back, like willfully and joyfully, not like feeling like he's, like burdened by it at all. In fact, he's saying, I'm your humble camel. When the camels get scared, I don't get scared. Like he's doing this out of love. And then he sees Ibn Umar, radiallahu an, and he says, do you think I've repaid her? And he said, instantly, he says, no, not even for a single pang of pregnancy. So it's not a transaction that can be settled. So on the one hand, yeah, it's not a debt that you owe, but it is an obligation. It's something that often what will happen is we will engage with parents in a transactional way. If they treat me good, I'll treat them good. If they don't treat me good, I don't treat them good. It's not the way it works. لَيْسَ الْوَاصِلُ بِالْمُكَافِئ. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, he said that the one that truly maintains the ties of kinship is not when the relatives are good to you. وَلَكِنَّ الْوَاصِلَ الَّذِي إِذَا قُطِعَتْ رَحِمُهُ وَصَلَهَا. Even when they cut the ties, you still maintain it. And so what ends up happening here is that you see these other ahadith where a person comes to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, says, Ya Rasulullah, I treat my family good and they treat me badly. I'm patient with them, they're harsh with me. And the Prophet ﷺ says, you will continue to have support from Allah against them as long as you remain upon that. It's in this one we can talk about some other time, because people that live in very abusive homes, you're not going to just come and say, no, you just got to take it. The whole idea is, so as long as you're maintaining your akhlaq, your manners, your characteristics, Allah's supporting you. It doesn't mean that you don't validate the pain, right? But more importantly, this transactional style of relating to people is something that goes a lot deeper into a core belief. You know what I mean? So it has that selfishness to it. There's that concept in the Quran called al-Mutaffifin. You know, the surah Wailun lil-Mutaffifin. These are the ones that demand their full measure in receiving everything, but they give less to others. So in this case, it's all about that self-entitlement. No, they have to give me. They have to do this for me. And you'll see this trait sometimes in people who expect so much from everybody else, but not themselves. Now, the opposite of that, you could see Birr al-Walidayn as the opposite of that, is that even when your parents don't give you your full rights, you still give them their full rights. They don't respect, you still respect them. That's why Birr al-Walidayn becomes so powerful. And this idea of I must get all my full due and not give other people, that's one thing, right? But the whole idea of, even in business, okay, because Wailun lil-Mutaffifin, the specific context is in the marketplace, but it can be extended to other things if you wanted to. But the idea is, even in the marketplace, there's a hadith that talk about a man who did no good deeds, except that when somebody he loaned money to had difficulty paying, he'd forgive them. And so Allah forgives him. And not just that, even the easygoing businessman, the person that's easygoing when selling and buying and judging, it's like a type of worship. So that personality type. So what does it take to be somebody who just makes things easy for others? Now, we could get into altruism, because I know you're dying to talk about that from a social psychology perspective. The idea is, this is more of, think of the personality type. You've all met people who are really tough to deal with, right? Sometimes it's a good reminder for us that, you don't have to do anything. Sometimes you just have to be easy with others. And I know how hard that is sometimes, especially when we get disappointed and frustrated and all that kind of stuff. But it's a reminder for all of us that sometimes we just got to take a step back. And in the here and now, think about the now and the hereafter. Because removing a branch from the road is the lowest branch in the branch of faith, but it's a huge thing to do. The interpersonal interactions, all the personality characteristics that make us easy with people, the ability to forgive people, the ability to deal with parents in a way better way. These are all part of that Iman. And you've heard time and time again how some small deeds lead to a massive reward and forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know the story of the prostitute that fed the dog, for example. When you think about it, so easy to judge people. But you don't know what action they do that gets them into Jannah. Likewise with yourself, it's so easy to think of just giving a small date or just removing something from the road or some small activity as insignificant. But at the end of the day, Amal al-Qulub have infinite mass. The actions of the heart are massive. Shukr, sabr, rida. These are branches of faith that have many, many other parts to it. So wherever you want to start, it's important to remember that getting into Jannah can be very easy. A man comes to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and this is a famous story where, he's asking about the salah and the siyam and the zakah, and he says, فَقَالْ وَاللَّهِ لَا أُزِيدُ عَلَى هَذَا وَلَا أَنْقُصُ. Wallah, I will not do any more or less than that. The five pillars of Islam, which is part of Aqidah, by the way, right? And the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, أَفْلَحْ in sadaq. He will be successful. He'll enter Jannah if he's truthful. So when we look at our pathway to paradise, inshallah, when we look at the here and now, and we start analyzing, what can I do now that will resonate into the hereafter? The easiest thing to do is to focus on the actions of the heart. You could be laying in your bed and forgiving people, and you're engaging in that activity. And while you're doing that, you're enhancing your spiritual health and well-being, right? Because at the end of the day, that Iman is not just it's not just belief. It's how that belief translates into action. Actions of the heart, actions of the tongue, actions of the body. Sometimes just removing something harmful from somebody or giving something to somebody that costs you nothing. It's very easy to give. الماعونيات could be the best place to start. جزاكم الله خير والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.